Hello, Austin, Texas. My name is Adam Sparks, and I am with AISD for All. We are a grassroots effort to promote equitable education in the city of Austin, and this video series is intended to bring ideas from the world of AISD into the Austin community at large. Today, I am very excited to be interviewing Vanessa Santamaria Dainton. Let me bring her on now. Vanessa, would you introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, my name is Vanessa Santamaria Dainton. I'm a Latina first-generation Uruguaya American. So my first language was Spanish. I'm a product of AISD public schools and a former bilingual teacher in AISD. And I'm currently a parent of two emerging bilinguals in AISD.
So you have experience as a bilingual, as a teacher in Spanish. And then you also sent your children to the dual language program at Ridgetop. Can you tell us about how dual language education works in the classroom and the origins of it as a strategy?
Well, in starting out, within the last 10 years, AISD has adopted dual language. So as their bilingual model, prior to these 10 years, the way Texas and the way public schools handled bilingual education was through a transitional model. Basically what that looks like, and that was the kind of teacher that I was. Between pre-K and second grade, it was mostly first native language, so that would have been Spanish, and instruction all in Spanish. And as you progressed from third and up, it would be less and less Spanish, so you're transitioning from Spanish to all English. The way dual language works is that you're actually learning both languages at the same time, the biliteracy model that we're using here in AISD. And so the last 10 years have transitioned quite a bit in our learning as a district as to how to implement dual language well and what different types of models to use. And so really depending on the campus that your school, your neighborhood school, or the school you choose to go to will depend on exactly the type of model that will be taught. So there are 50-50 models. You'll hear that kind of language. And so those are the different kinds of models you will see.
And the goal then is that children will speak both languages in most classrooms all the way through elementary school?
So the goal is biliteracy, bilingualism, and biculturalism. So that's a three-way goal. So you're not only learning language, but you're also learning culture. You're learning how to read in both languages. And so that culturalism piece really opens the door to have more conversations about culture, which I really like. And it opens up that opportunity for more than just Latino culture and more than just white culture or Black culture or whatever culture. It kind of opens that door up. Right now we have 4 two-way hub schools. That's what they call them. There are 4 schools that are completely, the entire school is doing dual language. You have children who are native English speakers with children who are native Spanish speakers within the same classroom. And they're learning both English and Spanish at the same time, using each other's assets to help each other's learning. In a one-way classroom, a one-way program at a school, that's where you have a predominantly one language is identified as the native language is stronger. So you could have a classroom like I used to teach where all of my children were native Spanish speakers. All of them are native Spanish speakers. They all know one language well. And so what you're doing is you're adding that English. So you're learning English and Spanish at the same time, but it's with a community that's all coming from the same native language. That's a one-way.
What are the opportunities in Austin? Is it only elementary school or are there programs beyond elementary?
That's a great question. So it does right now, 10 years ago, if you look at the trajectory, they started in kindergarten and first grade. And so now those children are in 10th grade. They're heading into 10th grade. They've identified areas or schools in town where most children are in dual language, are continuing and wanting to continue. And that's where they've been targeting programming. So right now, Travis High School and Aikens High School are dual language campuses. And there are more high school campuses and Navarro is also a new one that's starting to look into dual language. So those are the main ones right now.
So you took your children who spoke Spanish and English in the home growing up, and you enrolled them in the dual language program in Ridgetop when it was first beginning. Can you tell us about why Ridgetop implemented that, the issues at Ridgetop, or the enrollment issues at Ridgetop at the time, and then your experience in the dual language program with your children?
Yes. So my sister and I both have children the same age, and we grew up, and I just want to backtrack a little bit, is that when I grew up in the 80s in the school system, bilingual education was just starting. So I didn't have the luxury of being in a bilingual program. I was put in an immersion, basically immersed in English. So I remember being at home, the youngest of three, and my sisters just coming home crying, just crying because they did not understand the teachers. They did not understand what was happening. And I was watching all of this going on. I was lucky enough that I got a little bit of the English from my sisters learning at home. So when I came in, it wasn't such a hard transition for me. But I do remember that I would always get in trouble for talking. And I think part of that was that I was trying to use the space to practice this new language that I learned, and I didn't have anywhere else to do it. So, it's changed quite a bit in terms of really bilingual education was adopted in the mid 70s. But by the time it's really gotten strengthened, and now we're in this place where we're actually seeing the assets that children are bringing, it's an additive approach to have English and Spanish versus a subtractive approach, which is taking away the language to just move to English. And it's something that it's so valuable for me and the values that I have at home, because I realized in growing up that if my father wouldn't have been so adamant about us speaking Spanish and connecting to our culture at home, I would have lost my language. I would have lost my connection to speaking to my parents. I would have lost my connection to my country and my understanding of where I was from. And you have to be very intentional. And in being in this country too, I've learned about, one of my son's best friends in the dual language program, his mother went to high school with me, and his grandmother went to the Mexican school here in Austin. And she was reprimanded for using her Spanish here in Texas in the public schools. She was told that she shouldn't be using her language, and her native language in Spanish. So there's a lot of history in Austin and in the United States about, how Spanish speakers were oppressed and how they were told not to use their language, that we're finally, I feel like, turning a leaf and really respecting what our kids are bringing. And part of that is language, but more than any of it, it's the culture and the connection. And so I wanted that for my kids. I did not want them to be in a space where I was assimilating in school and trying to figure out what my identity was, because I knew to be successful equated education. And my educational experience was something that I couldn't connect to. And so I remember when I was in third grade or fourth grade, I made a birthday card for my father. And I wrote it in Spanish the best I could phonetically, because I didn't have books in Spanish. I didn't have anything at home. And I remember my father's expression and how proud he was of me, and how, it was all written wrong, I'm sure, but this sense of pride and honor, and just that is what, when I think about my education and my learning, that's what stuck with me. Somebody who cared about me, saw that I was trying to do something to connect. And I don't want my kids to forget what my experience was. I don't want them to forget who their family is. I don't want them to forget or how to talk to their grandmother who's still alive, who I didn't have the pleasure of meeting because I'm so far away from my family. So that's really important. And I think that that's what the dual language program for my kids was able to do, or trying to do, right? So I enrolled, my homeschool did not offer dual language, and it was the first year that it was piloted. They chose 4 different schools around town to pilot, to try it out. The reason Ridgetop was chosen is because it was in a neighborhood where 60 to 70% of the children were English learners, so they're emerging bilinguals, Spanish speakers. 90% of the students were low SES, And the school was like 60% enrollment capacity. So it was way under enrolled. Part of what was happening is that when families sometimes see a school with high poverty, low numbers, and I don't even remember what the STAR scores look like, to be honest with you. That wasn't something that I look for when I look at schools. I think that scares sometimes people from even walking in and trying to see what the feeling is of that. Another thing that I think scares people is when they don't walk in and they see people the same color as them or the same look as them. So for me, it was a no-brainer because I grew up as the brown kid in the white school, right? I taught a classroom full of brown kids in Spanish. I was comfortable in that environment. And I can't say that everyone can be comfortable seeing a mirror of themselves, but that felt good to me. I wanted my boys to be around kids that look like them too. That's really important to me. So I did a tour, and I recommend every parent do a tour of a school, walk around, get a feeling, and then that's how you know. And I felt like that was the right choice for my kids. And so as an enrollment strategy from a district perspective, they provided the dual language program to attract English speakers or attract families that would be willing to do that. And so my kids were learning English and Spanish at home. I thought this was perfect for the maintenance of their language and culture. And so it worked out. And we're fast forward now 5 or 6 years, and Ridgetop is over capacity. I do feel like there have been struggles along the way in terms of ensuring that the culture and the space for Spanish to be up on a pedestal. I mean, it's no doubt English is the power language in this country. You can walk to a store, you can walk to a gas station, you can walk anywhere and you're hearing English. Unless you have Spanish at home, you're having those two. So how do we ensure that Spanish becomes some kind of a dominant value in that school? And that's been hard to maintain as more people are catching wind that this could be a great opportunity for their kids. I think it's also very, very important that we allow for understanding of the history, allow space for children of color to also participate in those types of programs that provide a connection to culture, to language, but it's a great opportunity. It's just a small container of a school. You're muted, Adam. Oh,
Thank you.
I talked a lot on that one. I'm so sorry.
No, don't be. I think what you said was incredibly important, and I'll give you the counter to that, in that my mother is a Greek immigrant, and my father is from Texas, and so Greek wasn't really spoken in the home much, and I didn't end up learning Greek. I've since tried to take it in college and work on it on my own, but I know what it's like to be one generation removed from a heritage and a history. And I wasn't able to speak to my grandmother. I never spoke with my grandmother except through my mother, you know. And there's something so worthwhile in having two cultures and being able to get the best from both of them. And I think language, you can't do it without language. And so I'm happy to hear your success story. I know that I'm sure there are issues, but it's nice to see AISD, from what you were saying, from 2 generations back, moving in this direction. Let me just ask you a little bit about, are your children, where are they at now?
So now I have a Lively, or former Fulmore was the choice that both of my boys have taken for their middle school experience. And honestly, because of the fact that there are more than one, Lively is not the only school that is providing dual language. There are other middle schools that have dual language. But that one was, again, one that we walked through, went in, and just, it felt right. And my first son, I gave him more autonomy to choose because he was at that age as well. And so some of that came from a few of his friends choosing that school to go to. But the commitment that we made as a family was that they would both continue in dual language wherever they went. And all of the pieces fit perfectly for that one, for our family. But there are multiple schools that provide dual language. And I think that as a parent, you know, we need to come together as a community from a dual language program perspective to really share the resources that different schools and different things, different teachers offer. I don't know if now is an opportunity to take that, seeing that part of it is digital and online. But we completely love the humanities piece that connected to the language and culture learning that Lively offered. And so that social justice lens that Lively offers as well was what drew us. So they both of my sons, one will be starting at Lively next year and the other one finished. And now my high schooler is going to McCallum, which is his home school. And part of his decision in that one, I think mostly they're not offering dual language, but they're working, the administration is working with students, English learners, and has identified that a path for continuing language learning is needed. So they've created some new classes and they're continuing to grow in that area. A Latin American Studies class that's taught in Spanish. So I think that, and once again, I want to go back to my point too, that I feel like even though it's focusing on Latin America and Spanish language, I think the way the curriculum is designed is that it provides this really sort of learning differences approach, and it opens the door for kids to talk about their culture and their language and their heritage, and not just Spanish speakers. So I want to emphasize that too, because I think that was one of the strengths too that my son came away with, and why he's more interested in humanities and looking at different, more of a global view. And I think that perspective is really important in how the program works or how dual language is being taught.
It's really nice to hear about these programs and see the school district in many ways respond to the reality that is the Austin community, instead of trying to put something in Austin community, figuring out what we have here and working off that. If we're looking to the future of AISD, what needs to be implemented to promote these values and ensure that dual education works across the board from your point of view?
So I think I heard Dr. Holly once say that, show me your budget and I'll show you, and it'll tell me your priorities, right? And that's true. I mean, part of the work of a trustee is to be able to know how to fiscally be responsible and ensure that the budget aligns with the vision of the district, right? So in looking at how we're allocating funds and really broadening that, because what my thought is, let's look at our most marginalized groups within the district, and how are we broadening, or how are we fostering and nurturing their learning, right? Because if they're the most marginalized, that means that we're not reaching them, right? So then work from there and then determine what are programs or what are curriculums or what are ways of teaching that really align to the vision of being able to serve every child, especially our most vulnerable and most marginalized. And then from there, how do we open up those opportunities to all, especially our marginalized kids? So when I think about magnet programming, when I think about rigor and programs like dual language that are sometimes equated to enrichment, because for some it could be enrichment, for some it's connecting to better learning language, learning English. So, but really getting down to the core of who is really benefiting from this, and how are we ensuring that the beneficiaries are always going to be our marginalized thought of first. And so I feel privileged to have been part of this dual language program. I feel privileged. And I wish that we had more children of all backgrounds participating in something like this, to really, especially focusing on our English learners, of course, them being the primary recipients. But then how do we engage our Black community? How do we engage our other communities to participate and not make it about this being just for a specific group? Because the value that this program can bring, or the value that these teaching strategies can bring, harnessing those in ways that make sense for all children, I think would be a priority. And so again, it goes back to show me how you spend your money and we'll show you, because we can't also be everything to everyone, but we've got to come down to our core values and our core vision. And so then how can we do what's right for kids, but expand it so that more kids can be involved in ensuring that the marginalized are first, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. I feel like it's taking the best of what already exists in our community and harnessing it, as opposed to the other way around. This is the top down. This is more of a bottom up, bringing everyone in. I want to thank you very much for sharing your story. I think it helps me understand, the real lives of students in Austin. It helps me just to even know about dual language, something that I wasn't really tuned into. I'm happy that that's happening, and I'm happy that people are fighting for it to make sure that it is moving forward. I appreciate you joining in. Anything else you'd like to say?
I think there's 1,000 other things,
Yeah.
but I'm not.
Yeah,
So
maybe we'll do it again another time then.
Sure.
Thank you so very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Adam.
If you are interested in these sorts of topics and want to learn more, go to AISD for all, the word for spelled out, FOR.org, AISDforall.org. We'll be putting up a continuing series of educators, parents, students, community members on how AISD can improve, what we do right, what we need improvement on, and we want you to come join our community. So if this is something you're interested in, please visit AISD for all and join us. Thank you.